you want to, you're welcome. I wish you a refuah shlema, a speedy recovery, Merlot. Okay, anyone else who wants to like turn on your camera, I'd love to see you because it adds to the discussion, but we're going to start. First, we start with a blessing for studying Torah. So please join me if you can. Baruch atah Adonai.
Asher kitchanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asot divrei Torah.
Amen. So last time we had this very interesting discussion about Shifra and Pua, the two
rescuers, no,
midwives, midwives, Egyptian or Israel or Israelite. We kind of decided they probably were Egyptian and righteous Gentiles, righteous converts, some say, but anyway, their whole story. And now we move on to another woman who is mentioned. I mean, her name is only mentioned once, but she's a very important part of the story, which is Moses's mother, Jochebed. And if you remember when we talked about Sirach, how she had all this very long life, all of these kind of special powers, it seems that the rabbis also honor Jochebed in a similar way. And, you know, I'm going to be honest with you, I'm feeling better the more I read the Midrash and the more I read about what the rabbis are saying about a lot of these matriarchs, that they did give them honor, they did give them respect, even if they were creating, you know, mythical explanations. They were very positive. They were very admiring and even exalting and uplifting images and ideas of these women, which, you know, there's a lot of complaints that the Torah is sexist or that Judaism is very skewed male, but we see that the rabbis actually were very open to righteous women, women of valor, and gave them a lot of honor. So I did send out, it's part of our last week's text. It's like further down, but I do have it to share with you for those who didn't download it. And it is right here, and I'm going to share it. And no, that's not it. Oh, maybe it's further up.
The one you just sent, right? The one that you sent this morning you're talking about? Yeah.
It's the same as last week's. And the first part was Shifra and Pua, and then on page 7, it goes to Jochebed.
Oh, so it is the same. Oh, I printed it out.
That's okay. It's okay. But it's on page 7. If you go further down, and it's interesting because wait a minute, this is Shifra and Pua. Where's it? Where's Jochebed?
6, 7, 6.
No, 6.
Bottom of 6.
6.
It's last week 6.
Top. Okay, so page 7 on mine it's 7. You could be 6 where it says Jochebed.
Yes.
Okay.
Page 6. Yeah.
Okay. So first we're going to look at the text, and let's just read the Torah text. This is in Hebrew and in English, what it says. So we know because the rabbis in the Midrash and in the commentaries always fill in the blanks. They always start with the text as their root or their base. And then from there, they start to explain. But everything is rooted in the actual text of the Torah. So we have to know the text before we can go into their understanding, our understanding, the Midrash. So who would like to read the actual text? Who would like to read? Okay, Doris.
Okay. A certain man of the house of Levi went and married a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw how beautiful he was, she hid him for 3 months.
Keep going.
I think I turned too many pages. I'm sorry.
Okay.
When she could hide him no longer, she got a wicker basket for him and caulked it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child into it and placed it among the reeds by the bank of the Nile. and his sister stationed herself at a distance to learn what would befall him. The daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe in the Nile, while her maidens walked along the Nile. She spied the basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to fetch it. When she opened it, she saw that it was a child, a boy crying. She took pity on it and said, "That must be a Hebrew child." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get you a Hebrew nurse to suckle the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter answered, "Yes." So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child and nurse it for me, and I will pay you wages." So the woman took the child and nursed it. When her child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, who made him her son. She named him Moses, Hebrew Moshe from Egyptian, for born of, here associated with Masha, draw out, explaining I drew him out of the water.
Okay, so all right, so I'm going to, okay. Wait a minute.
Question.
There's some questions. Let's look at some questions first of all. Okay, already, Leslie, you have a question? Great.
Tiny question. When the child grew up, she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter. How old are we talking about? I always thought Pharaoh's daughter raised him in the palace.
Let me look. Vayagdale. Well, usually
Or is it just weaning?
it's weaning, usually, but in Hebrew it literally says Vayagdale. The little child grew. It doesn't say grew up. He grew. So that's interesting because everybody always thinks it's weaning, but doesn't say that in the text. It says Vayagdale, from gadol, meaning to grow. So it's all commentary on how old he was, interestingly. However, it does say this: take this child and nurse it for me. And she nursed it. So I guess the implication is when he was no longer nursing, but it doesn't say that. You're absolutely right. But let's go back. Let's look at, what other questions do we have before we even read what other people said? So how are the women portrayed in this story?
Very brave.
They're brave, but they're nameless. They're nameless.
Oh.
He has a
The
name.
father's pretty much absent too.
Right. But he's never heard from again.
But that's her. Yeah.
Okay, so that's a first question. They're nameless. And that's why when a woman is named, it's a big deal. And that's why Shifra and Puah was a big deal, because you could see a lot of times all these women have no names. Now the rabbis give them names and we learn their names later, but right now in this part of the story, the only name is Moses. Moses gets his name, but nobody else has a name. Okay, there's another question. If implied here, it says his sister stationed herself at a distance.
Mm-hmm.
And then in the first part, it says a certain man went and married a Levite woman. And then she had a son. So where does the sister come in? I mean, if they just married, he married a woman, they had a son, how come there's a sister? And we know there's a brother because we know there's Aaron. He's not even mentioned here yet. But so here's another question that the rabbis answer. But this is what they can read this and say, wait a minute, he married a woman and she had a son, and then they mention a sister. So how do we figure that out? So that's number one.
A different father.
We don't get that anywhere, that it was a different father, that they were half siblings, but.
Well, maybe it didn't matter because the whole thing was you're supposed to kill the boys. So the sister was irrelevant, maybe. So her birth wasn't
The
important.
marriage. I'm asking you if he married her. Oh, that they didn't even bother mentioning her. But we know there was an older boy. Later, we learn Aaron. Moses and Aaron are very important as a duo. Aaron speaks for him because Moses has a speech impediment that we also learn about later. Okay, let me ask you this. She saw this basket among the reeds and sent her slave girl to fetch it. And she said, this must be a Hebrew child. Why would she think that?
Circumcision.
Was he circumcised? I mean,
Circumcised.
I would assume circumcised, and maybe there was a slave blanket on him? Because I can't see her just putting him into the basket with no cushioning or anything. So there was
That's what I'm thinking, a blanket.
some kind of a blanket or whatever. And also, here's another thing to think about. How easy, common, or allowed would it be for a slave little girl to approach the daughter of Pharaoh?
Right.
You know, like going up to her. I mean, how did she even get there? I mean, a slave, you know, so, and then I have a question, which I've only read one answer. It's not in here, but why was Pharaoh's daughter taking a bath in the Nile River with crocodiles and reeds? And I don't know. I mean, is that the place you take a princess? Don't they have gorgeous baths? I mean, the Romans had baths. I imagine the Egyptians must have had tiled, beautiful baths. So why was she bathing in the Nile River is a question I have. I don't think it was the safest place, and it probably not that clean. I don't think that was their drinking water or anything. I'm not sure, actually.
Because
But-
the story wouldn't work if she didn't.
That's right. Well, the story wouldn't have worked. But I read, yeah, Susan.
I heard one or read one midrash. It still doesn't answer totally your question, but that she was young and probably a rebellious teenager, did not want to follow her father's rules, and went to the river anyway. Maybe she was curious with all the babies floating in the Nile.
That's very
There are a
interesting.
lot of babies floating in the Nile, or just that?
No, I just threw that
That's
in.
one.
No, no.
I have an
There's a lot of
idea.
babies floating in the Nile.
Yes.
Maybe she didn't have a baby.
Being drowned in the Nile. No,
Yeah.
I read that she was somewhat rebellious. She had her own, she was strong-willed, which she had to be and that's why she went. But I still think that the crocodile thing would be, young people bungee dive too, so.
I had read, this is not in the text that we're going to read, but I had read that she was, first of all, the rabbis gave her a name, Batya. Batya means daughter of God. And she was considered very righteous. And some midrashim said she went on the Exodus along with the Israelites and with Moses. I mean, though imagine how old she was. I mean, everybody's really old, but anyway, but they said that she disagreed and vehemently disagreed with what her father was doing to the Hebrew slaves. And she was standing in the water like an act of defiance, like, okay, well, drown me. I'm your daughter. How would you feel about that? So she was standing there. But though it does say, Lirchotz, it says that she went to bathe, but that was the idea that she's basically standing there as a symbol of protest against her father.
She's an activist.
So, but we do know that she must have had a lot of influence, or she was a beloved daughter who got away with, your favorite child or your only child gets away with a lot, because Pharaoh did let her raise this baby, which also then, we say she's a young girl. Well, how young a girl was she if she was raising a baby? So that's another question. And of course, she would have her servants helping her raise the baby, but she couldn't have been, I don't know, a teen, maybe late teens, maybe 20. I don't know, but we don't really know her age. But all of these are sort of interesting questions before we even start to look at how the rabbis, I'm sure there are many more. Oh, here's another one. Most people don't see this. In the second line, it says in Hebrew, "Vatahar Isha," and the woman got pregnant, "Vateled ben," and she had a son, "V'tira oto ki tovu," and she saw that he was beautiful. So we always think of Moses as this old man with a beard, Charlton Heston, whatever, but he was a beautiful child, a beautiful boy. And I imagine when we look at the story of Zipporah, who Moses marries, that he was very handsome. And, when she meets him at the well, they meet at the well because everybody in the Bible meets their beloved at the well, symbol of the womb, so to speak. So, but we have to remember that Moses was not just an old guy. He was a young prince, raised as a prince. And perhaps one of the reasons he was chosen to be the leader of the Israelites is because he's unlike anyone else, any other slave-born person. He straddled both worlds. He had lived in the Egyptian world and he had lived in the Israelite slave world, and he spoke both languages if there were separate languages. He understood both cultures. He understood everything about both sides, which makes him uniquely placed to be the leader. So I just want to point that out because we don't often think about that about Moses, even though he had a speech problem. And I'm sure, Susan Ehrlich, you know the Midrash or Risa about why he had a speech problem. Risa, do you know?
Yeah. You have to reach, the baby had to reach for a piece of coal or a piece of gold as an infant. And he chose the coal and put it to his mouth.
Okay, there's a little more to it than that.
Well, yeah, there's a whole story of why they did that.
Well, tell us.
I don't remember the details of it, but it was something to do with the nature of the child, predicting the nature of the child.
So Pharaoh's magicians and prophets said this child is a threat to your empire and to your kingship, and he should be put to death. And the daughter, of course, said, what are you talking about? He's an innocent child. So they said, let's make a test. They put a plate of glittering jewels in one side and a plate of burning hot coals on the other. And the magicians and the prophets, the Egyptian prophets said, if he reaches for the jewels, he's going for your crown. If he reaches for the coal, then, he's a threat. Well, what baby is not going to reach for jewels and glitter and color? Yeah. So the Midrash, because we love the Midrash, says that he reached for the jewels, but an angel came down and pushed his hand and he touched the coals and he burned his fingers and placed them in his mouth and burned his tongue. And that's why he had a speech impediment, because his tongue had scarring or whatever, or his palate had scarring. So that's why he wasn't a good speaker. And when in the spiritual experience where God confronts Moses in the burning bush and talks to him and says, go down to Pharaoh and tell him to free my people, Moses says, I'm not the right person. I'm slow of speech. I'm a bad speaker. And then we finally hear the name of Moses' brother, Aaron. And he says, your brother Aaron will speak for you. I will tell you what to say. You'll tell Aaron and Aaron will speak for you. So Aaron was his mouthpiece, so to speak. Anyway, all of this is sort of backstory, which I think is really interesting. And now we're going to sort of read the Jewish Women's Archive, which you can go online and find this. It's really interesting. It's the Midrash and Agada. Agada is a little more folktale-y, and Midrash is the rabbis find a source in the text.
Could I just ask a quick
Susan, I have one just thing in Disney's The Prince of Egypt. He's young and good looking and he's good at sports and everything else. So,
right. You're right. But you're right. I mean, that's the proper way to portray him. But a lot of people, when we think of, say, Moses, we think of old Moses. So I just wanted to remind everybody, but you're right. Who else? Doris?
I have a question. Right in the second sentence, and it says, and his sister stationed herself at a distance. Is that just a typo? Should it have been her sister, meaning?
No, the baby boy's sister.
The baby boy's sister.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh, he had a sister.
Well, that's the thing.
That's Miriam.
Miriam.
Okay. I didn't get that. I'm sorry. Okay.
You're right, Doris, because it says they got married and had a baby and suddenly there's a sister. So the rabbis have a very interesting answer for why it's this way. Why it says they just got married. And we're going to get there in a minute. Okay, so first, let's just set up Jochebed. That's her name, Jochebed. We hear it once later on. Who wants to read about Jochebed?
I will.
Okay.
Where do we start?
So Midrash portrays Jochebed.
The Midrash portrays Jochebed as a wise woman who was righteous and God-fearing. By merit of her good deeds, she gave birth to the three leaders of the Exodus generation, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. A number of miracles were performed for Jochebed in connection with the birth of Moses. She bore him at the age of 130, and God restored her youth and her beauty. Jochebed enjoyed longevity, living to witness the positions of leadership held by her children, but even one of the Israelites who entered the land of Canaan.
Okay, so that's Midrash. 1 second.
Okay.
And who does that remind you of? Sue Casa, I know you have a question. Go ahead, and then I'll come back. Sue, go ahead.
I didn't think of this before, but how come Aaron, as a Jewish boy, wasn't killed?
Older.
You're right. Perhaps he was already not
He was older? Okay.
born before the edict.
Thank you, Risa.
Yeah. Okay. Now, who does this remind you of? Another woman who had a baby at a very old age.
Sarah.
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 So again, like, and it's like God reconstructed her womb. God kept her young. But again, they want to say 130 because they want to say that she, came in with, I don't know why. We'll find out why they make her so old. Okay. All right. Continue. One more, Donna.
Okay. The conception and birth of Jochebed. In addition to her given name, the Torah also designates Jochebed as the daughter of Levi. Numbers 26, verse 59. The name of Abraham's wife was Jochebed, daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Egypt. The Midrash adds that she was conceived on the way to Egypt and was born between the walls.
At the entrance to Egypt.
At the entrance to Egypt, Although the Torah asserts that Jacob's household who came to Egypt numbered 70 souls, the rabbis noted that only 69 individuals are listed in Genesis 46. One of the explanations of this discrepancy is that Jochebed completed the number 70. She was not included in the list because she was still in her mother's womb.
Okay, so again, it's so similar to Sirach. It's almost weird that she was born on the way to Egypt, just like Sirach, that Sirach was Sirach, daughter of Asher, and this is Jochebed, daughter of Levi. And again, she's mentioned in Numbers, which means on her way out. So it's these women, I can't even explain why their names are in these places, but her name, Jochebed, is not listed in this story, but they say this is Jochebed, but doesn't give her that name. Okay.
But wasn't the Exodus 400 years later?
Yeah.
Yes. These women, they say there's a gene. It's really an Ashkenazi Jews. I don't know if you've heard about it. There's a Jewish longevity gene that some Jewish Ashkenazi families seem to have, very few, but I read about it, I think in New York Magazine, like this one family, there were 3 siblings and they were like 100, 101, and 102. And they were all in good health. And they said, what is it? How do they live that long? They were trying to study their genetics because what was it about them? They didn't do anything that particular. But biblical genetics give us a much longer.
Wow. My great grandma lived to be 103.
Who did?
My great grandma.
Oh, that's amazing. I mean, yeah. Okay, so let's talk about, and now suddenly we're mentioning the husband, Amram, which comes later. He's not mentioned either. This is the husband, Jochebed and Amram. Okay, so who wants to read now? Somebody else. Okay, Lori.
Jochebed bore Amram 3 righteous offspring. Each was a prophet and each served Israel, provided them physical succor. By merit of Moses, the Israelites were given the manna. By merit of Aaron, clouds of glory surrounded the Israelites and protected them during their journeying in the wilderness. And by merit of Miriam, the well accompanied them wherever they went.
So we know the story about Miriam, that the Midrash said wherever Miriam went, a well appeared in the desert. And how did the rabbis understand that? Because if you look at in the book of Numbers, when Miriam dies, it says, and Miriam dies and was buried. The next sentence is, and there was no water. The very next sentence.
Okay.
So the rabbis go, aha. As soon as she dies, they mention no water. That must mean when she was alive, there was always water. So that's how they understand that. And we know now that we put a beautiful cup of water on the Seder table to represent Miriam and everything she did for the Jewish people during the Exodus. Okay, continue.
Accordingly, Proverbs 14, verse 1, the wisest of women builds her house, is applied to Miriam. Midrash, Proverb 14:1. The Midrash apparently understands builds her house in a broad sense because Jochebed's wisdom in the raising of her own children led to the building and firm establishment of the entire people of Israel.
So you can just see, like, for every book of the Torah, there's a book of Midrash or the Bible, not the Torah. This is Proverbs, is in the Ketuvim. So there's Proverbs, and then there's Midrash Proverbs. There's Genesis, Bereshit, and there's Midrash Bereshit. There's Midrash for everything, where the rabbis went through every line, and they looked at them, and if they had a question, they came up with a Midrash over time. This was not like one group. This is like a cumulative effect that we have, and I have a fabulous book of Midrash. It's like, look at this book. Let's see how it is. This is Midrash. It's wonderful. So, and you can find really interesting things in there. Okay.
I love it. I love it.
All right. So now here is a big question that the rabbis, though, they prefer Jewish women over non-Jewish women as much as possible. So every good person is Jewish. Justify it. So, okay, who wants to read? Lori, why don't you read one more?
Okay. Shiphrah is Jochebed. The
Right.
rabbis identify Jochebed with Shiphrah, one of the two Hebrew midwives, Shiphrah and Puah, who delivered the children of the Israelites during the Egyptian servitude. The Torah relates that the midwives did not fulfill Pharaoh's command because they feared God, who rewarded them for their actions. He established households for them, Exodus 1:21, which the rabbis understand as priestly and Levitical households or as royal households. Jochebed herself was from the tribe of Levi, and her two sons, Aaron and Moses, attained the high priesthood and the scepter of royalty. Okay.
Of royalty. So it does say, and God established batim, houses or households for them. And I mean, it makes sense. They say, well, yeah, the priests, all the Kohanim are descended from Aaron, the high priest, and the Levite tribe that Moses is from are the ones that, tended the temple, which was also considered, a higher level than the rest of us normal peasant Israelites. So, which I include myself in. So,
Oh, bless your heart.
that's how the rabbis say, oh, that's how we know that one of the reasons we know Shiphrah is Jochebed. Okay, so who wants to read more? And we decided last week that Shiphrah was not Jochebed, she was Egyptian. But what I love about it is, well, here's another this one makes sense too. Okay, who else would like to read? Who hasn't read? Penina, how about you?
Where are we?
According to the one midrashic view, right here.
Okay. Oh, that's very small. Okay. According
I can make it bigger. Hold on.
that's okay. Okay, it's the top of the page, right?
What's that?
Okay, now, well, now you brought it too high. Okay, here we go. Okay. According to one midrashic view, Shifra and Puah were mother and daughter. Jochebed and Miriam, while in other states, they were daughter-in-law and mother-in-law. Jochebed and Elisheva, daughter of Aminadav. Jochebed was given the name Shifra because, this is a whole mishmash, because she would cleanse,
Mishaperet.
I don't know what it means. Mishaperet, the newborn, by washing it and cleaning it after birth. Another etymological explanation is that by merit of her deeds, the Israelites were fruitful, she paru, and multiplied in her time.
Okay, so
Okay.
they're taking the name Shifra, translating it, and they're saying this is Jochebed because she would cleanse the children, she helped them multiply. Here's yet another tradition explains that her actions performed good deeds that were pleasing to God. And another one is that she smoothed over Shipra, her daughter Puah's words. The latter, in other words, Puah or Miriam, had spoken impudently to Pharaoh, who sought to kill her in his anger. Shifra placated him by saying, do you pay attention to such a one as her? She is a witless baby. So probably Miriam, they're saying, said, we're not going to kill these children. Are you crazy or whatever? Okay, I just want to read a little more. Exodus 1:17 relates that the midwives fearing God let the boys live. Their reward for fearing God, according to the Midrash, is Torah. Because Jochebed feared the Lord, she gave birth to Moses, through whom the Torah was given.
Wow.
So they have all of these beautiful kind of religious understandings. Okay. So now, all right, I want
Susan, I have one question that was skipped over here.
Yeah.
Jochebed, this is the first time I've seen it here. Well, not that I've seen a lot, but Jochebed and Elisheva was daughter of Aminadab.
Okay.
And the son of Aminadab was Nachshon. So
Nachshon and I guess Amram must have been here. Another. So Nachshon and Elisheva were
brother and sister. And then in Midrash says that Elisheva was Aaron's wife.
Right, that's right. But where do we get that? I don't know.
No, that was a Midrash. It's in Ephraim on the footnotes on the bottom.
If you don't remember who Nachshon is and why he's so famous, and this was his sister who married Aaron, so they were a highborn family, is when they were at the banks, at the shore of the Red Sea, and God said to Moses, spread out your arms, and the sea didn't part. Nachshon was the one who walked in up to his knees, up to his waist, up to his chin. And when he got up to his nose or his face, the water parted. So the Midrash is that he's a very famous, brave man who believed so strongly that he went into the water even before it parted, and then it parted when he was almost all the way in. So Nachshon is considered a prince, and a Levite, I think, as well. And his sister married Moses's brother Aaron, which means in this story, I mean, they don't think this far ahead, that Aaron was already married when Moses was born. Because
he couldn't have been born because Moses led the people out as an adult.
I know, but they're saying if Jochebed was Puah, was Shifra.
Oh, well, I'm not going with that. I'm just going with their acknowledgement of Elisheva as being Jochebed's daughter-in-law.
Sister-in-law.
Daughter-in-law, I guess.
Oh, daughter-in-law, sorry.
It's hard to keep up.
It is, okay. Right.
Well, Jochebed was 130 when she had Moses. She could have had 15 children before that. I mean.
Okay, so now, all right. So Leslie, I want you to read this because here's the reason that the text is the way it is according to the rabbis. Her divorce and marriage.
Wait, oh, you're over there?
Yeah.
So sorry. Okay. Her divorce and remarriage to Amram. Exodus 2 tells of the birth of Moses. It begins with the marriage of Jochebed and Amram, and then the reader is immediately told of Moses' birth, concealment, and rescue. This sequence omits a lengthy period of time for Jochebed and Amram already had two other children, Aaron and Miriam, when Moses was born. The Torah seemingly chose to concentrate on the birth of Israel's deliverer and therefore did not mention his two elder siblings. The rabbis resolved this abbreviated chronology by stating that Jochebed and Amram divorced, and Exodus 2:1 portrays their remarriage.
Okay, so they were married, they had two children, and then they got divorced, and they got remarried.
I mean, it's not very nice to not talk about Aaron and Miriam anyway. You know what I mean? It's like, well, they're irrelevant right now. Moses is the only one, so we're only going to talk about him.
Yep, that's how they did it. So,
How was
but the
Aaron saved? If Aaron was the firstborn, how come he was not put out to the bulrushes and given away? I mean, why did they wait for the second son to do that?
Well, we think that because he was old already, he wasn't a baby in danger.
Oh, he wasn't a baby. Oh, I see.
He could have been 5, he could have been 10. You know, he wasn't
Or more.
He wasn't a newborn.
The decree was for newborn males, and Aaron was already 3 years old.
Oh, he was 3? That's it? Oh, I
couldn't answer
Well,
the questions.
Okay.
He wasn't married because he was a kid.
But Susan,
Yeah.
if you go with the rabbis, I mean, what's their thinking? I mean, if you say that Pua was her daughter-in-law, and that means
That means Aaron was already married. Oh,
Elisheva was Pua, then Aaron had to be married already.
yeah.
What a story.
Whatever.
Rabbi,
Yeah.
do you think it may be that at the time of writing all of this down, that the rabbis didn't think that those reading it, us peons, would be able to keep up with the story, so they simplified it, and then as it progresses, then they kind of modify? It makes it more confusing, but I'm just wondering.
I think, to be honest with you, that these these, not the laws, but the stories of our main characters were compiled in fragments. I don't know that they all were the same story. There were different parts of the story. They put them together. They were told, and then they were written down. We also know that there's the kingdom of Israel and the kingdom of Judah for a while, and they had their own versions of these stories before everything was canonized or put together and written down. Things weren't really written down until like 400 BCE. I mean, the first time the whole Torah was read to the people was with Ezra. Yeah, Penina, 1 second. And so different versions. Maybe should.
Having trouble hearing you. Please mute the phone.
Somebody's
Please
phone.
go.
Somebody's phone.
Doris's.
No, mine's not ringing.
Okay.
Thank you. Okay.
Penina.
I got my phone right here. It's not ringing.
Penina.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. We are getting kind of like stuck on the numbers, and we have to look really what the story is really telling you here. First of all, the word Jochebed means that she carried a load, kaved. She had a decision to make. She had this baby. I'm not looking how many years after Aaron and after Miriam. It had to be after the law came that they have to throw the babies in the river, when she decided to put Moses in the basket. So, first of all, she had a very heavy decision. Second, once the daughter of Pharaoh took him, we think she was barren herself. I think it's even mentioned. And that's why I mentioned before that every time that there is a personality being born, the mother is barren, to emphasize the importance of this child. Now, Jochebed is being summoned by his sister to feed him, to nurse him. Today, we call a Jew if his mother is Jewish, because she's in charge of teaching this child, because he's at home, how to behave in a Jewish way and to speak the language. So now he's going up and he's stuttering. He had to deal with 2 languages, okay? And with a woman who is supposed to be his mother, and yet the nanny, who is the real mother, is teaching him to be Jewish and to speak, and she's nursing him. So no wonder when he grows up, he is stuttering. He has to deal with this dual personality. And now, yeah, I know my son, because I spoke Hebrew, didn't open his mouth till after he was 3 years old, because we spoke Hebrew in the house till the doctor said, stop that, do whatever he sees on TV. TV was in English. So he started talking English when we stopped talking Hebrew in the house. Some kids can manage it, some cannot. And we thought something was wrong with him. And then he was the smartest one. He was the valedictorian of his high school, and he spoke. So there is a thing here that this Moses had to know that he's also Jewish, because when Hebrew, not Jewish, Hebrew, because when he comes out and he sees that the Egyptian man is about to kill a Hebrew man, he stands up for the Hebrew guy and he kills the guard.
Right.
So he knows he's Hebrew also.
Yes.
So the whole idea here is the heavy duty of the mother, that first she saved him, then she's teaching him. She is like that source of him knowing that he's Hebrew. And also now it reflects into history. Like I said before, that you are Jewish if your mother is Jewish. It shows you. And that's what I see out of that story. So
okay, I like what you're saying very much. Actually, you were the child of the father until like the Crusades or the Middle Ages, because like Abraham and a lot of these patriarchs married non-Jewish women, but the children Hebrew, but they still were considered Hebrew. But I love what you say about Jochebed and the word kaved.
That's right. She had a lot of duty, a lot of responsibility. She had to decide whether she throws him in the river or not. Then she nurses him. Then she has to teach him all his life that he is Hebrew.
Well, we don't know. We can only imagine if he had contact or how much contact he had with his family once he went into the palace. On the other hand, he knows who his brother Aaron and his sister Miriam is. So
that woman is there all the time.
Okay, thank you. I absolutely agree with you. So I just want to go back to this. You're right. We're getting too caught up. But this question, though, of how were they married and what happened and the divorce idea, I just want Leslie to finish this sentence.
In the Bible.
Okay. No, none of this is in the Bible. Right. Go ahead, Leslie.
Okay. According to this tradition, Amram was the leading scholar of the generation. When he saw that Pharaoh, I'm not muted, right?
No, you're not muted.
Okay, sorry. When he saw that Pharaoh had decreed that all the boys be cast into the Nile, he proclaimed, "Are we laboring in vain? We give birth to sons who will eventually be killed." And so he divorced his wife. All Israel saw this, and in consequence, they also divorced their wives.
So he said, why are we even having children? If our sons are all going to die, nobody's going to carry on our name or carry on anything.
And so that nobody had sex outside of marriage either, by the way?
No.
Okay.
Of course not. In the Midrash? No. They're studying. He's a scholar. This guy is they're giving him that he's a scholar, even though he's a slave. And probably, they knew. Other traditions say that the two things that they did was they kept their Hebrew names and they remembered who they were. That was enough. They were Hebrews and they kept their Hebrew names in their tribes. But the rest.
And how are they considered royalty? I meant to ask that earlier. We were talking about royalty earlier, that some of them were royalty. They were all slaves. How did they have that kind of hierarchy?
Well,
you could get into a whole discussion on why would they even want to do that after they've just been enslaved by a king, a pharaoh. Why would they want to make,
The idea is royalty came later on. There was no temple, there were no priests or whatever, but that was the reward of their descendants, is what they're saying. Not them. Their descendants got this.
That's a whole other discussion too, that whole thing.
So now I love this. Miriam Miriam, who they call when she's on the edge of the Red Sea, they call her Miriam Haniviyah, Miriam the prophet. So now here she is at 6 years old, and she's already wiser than her father. So read about this, Leslie.
Okay. Miriam, who was 6 years old at the time, said, Father, Father, your decree is harsher than that of Pharaoh. Pharaoh only decreed against the males, but you have decreed against both the males and the females, since all the Israelites withdrew from their wives, neither sons nor daughters would come into the world. Pharaoh decreed only for this world, but you decreed both for this world and the next. A baby that was born and died as a result of Pharaoh's decree would merit the world to come, but an unborn child would not attain this. It is doubtful whether the decree of the wicked Pharaoh will be fulfilled, but you are righteous and your decree will undoubtedly be fulfilled. Should I go on?
Yeah.
Amnon heeded his daughter and returned to his wife, whom he remarried in a public celebration with all possible pomp and ceremony. He sat her in a palanquin. Aaron and Miriam danced before her, and the ministering angels proclaimed, he sets the childless woman, I'm not going to tap that, among her household as a happy mother of children. Jochebed, who had been uprooted from her home as a result of the decree of Pharaoh, would now be set happily among her household. All Israel saw this, and they too remarried their wives.
So that's how they explain why it says a man married a woman and then had a baby boy, because it was after their remarriage that they had Moses.
Yeah.
They already had Miriam and Aaron.
So in this marriage, it's the wife that's thrown out. And I mean, they say that Jochebed basically left her household and her children, and now she got to be reunited with her family. So she was what, thrown to the wolves kind of thing?
No, he left. It says Amram returned to his wife. He left her. Or, I mean, this kind of.
Well, it says she had been uprooted from her home.
Oh, I think.
As a result of the decree of Pharaoh. I don't know. It's confusing.
And it says that Jochebed was pregnant with Moses when they got divorced. So
that's possible too. I mean, this didn't happen. We know that this is their understanding, but if it were a divorce, it was an amicable divorce where they probably still lived together, and everything, but they didn't have sexual relations. I mean, it wasn't like he, didn't love her. He was saying, I don't want to have sons that will be murdered. So I'm withdrawing from my wife. So, I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's a little far-fetched, but okay. So now there's this whole thing. Let's go into this thing, which is very kind of like a Jesus thing to me. Interesting about, when Moses was born, there wasn't an annunciation. There was this idea that he had light, like a halo or something about him was very special. It says, when Moses was born, here it is, Jochebed saw how good he was. The rabbis asked what Jochebed saw that was special in her son, on account of which she sought to save him from Pharaoh's decree. According to one opinion, she realized that he was suited to be a prophet. According to another, she saw that he was born circumcised. According to a third, she saw that the entire house was filled with light. It's so interesting about saviors and deliverers, how there is a classical idea. I mean, you could actually imagine a Madonna and child painting being Jochebed and Moses, holding the baby, an angel around him, a halo around him. It's similar vision of a deliverer. It's the only thing is that it's not a virgin birth, but because that's from more Roman mythology, but this idea of a deliverer always having a special light. And it says all three explanations, Jochebed immediately comprehended that her son was meant for greatness, and she discerned that he possessed unique spiritual qualities. According to another interpretation, she named her son Tov, or Tobiah, which was what his parents called him until Pharaoh's daughter renamed him Moses. So I never knew that Moses had another name, because, you can think about it. She had a baby for 3 months. She named him Tov or Tovia. which I think is interesting. Okay, here's another thing. Jochebed succeeded in concealing Moses for 3 months. The Midrash says the Egyptians counted the months of her pregnancy only from her return to Amram. Oh, who said she was already pregnant? Yeah.
It said so.
Yeah, it says that.
She was
Yeah.
pregnant already, yeah.
She already
Yeah.
could hide the baby for, and she could keep him for 3 months. Okay. Let's see. I want to see what else I want to talk to you about because we have like 5 minutes. Okay. No. All right. There's a lot of interesting things. It says, let's look at Moses's wet nurse. Who wants to read this one?
I will, but I just want to say the one you just skipped over and I read.
Which one?
That the basket. It's pointed out that the bitumen pitch, the basket for Moses was like the ark for Torah.
Okay. All right. Why don't you read that? Okay.
Oh, okay.
Here, let me make it bigger for you.
Yeah, so I don't know whether that's more interesting than his wet nurse.
That's all right.
After 3 months, Jochebed was forced to obey the decree of Pharaoh. The Midrash describes in detail how she prepared the Ark of Moses. She chose bulrushes, a soft and flexible material that is capable of withstanding contact with soft and hard objects. She caulked it with bitumen and pitch, lining the inside with bitumen and coating it on the outside with pitch so that Moses would not smell the bad odor given off by the ladder. The wording "she placed it among the reeds" teaches that Jochebed put the ark in a protected place where bushes and reeds grow. Although that doesn't, now this says about the ark. Another Midrash has Jochebed building a little canopy for Moses inside the ark. For she said to herself, perhaps I will not see him under his wedding canopy. This portrayal emphasizes the painstaking attention that Jochebed paid to every detail in the ark. She took leave of her baby with a heavy heart and tried with all her might to protect him and ensure that he remained alive. So
Okay.
This doesn't say that, but it's still nice.
Okay, so I want to go to this. So I want to go back to something Penina said about the heavy heart and the mother, the burden of the mother to save her child. So we know tomorrow, by the way, is International Holocaust Remembrance Day. And it's the day of the liberation of Auschwitz. But we know of stories of Jewish mothers who gave their children away to Christian families to save their lives. Think about it. Or the kinder transport, where you put your child on a train and sent it to England. This was from Germany, in order to save them from what was coming. This was like in 1938, or 39 already, when they could get them out. And many of these children never saw their parents again. So it's interesting to reflect. There's the attitude of if we all go together, or no, I'm saving my child. And there were stories. Any of you saw the Zookeeper's Wife?
Yeah.
I read it. Yeah.
And they were smuggling. And there was another woman also. Actually, she lived in Los Angeles, who smuggled out hundreds of babies from the Warsaw Ghetto. And then you was it in the Zookeeper's Wife where she placed them with Christian families and kept a list of where they were?
I think so.
Could you give your child away to save its life, his or her life? I mean,
Yes.
If I was going to die and he had a chance to survive, I would have done it, yeah.
but you don't know that you're going to die. You're not sure.
Oh, yeah,
It's really dangerous.
Yeah.
Really dangerous. It's like, so that's basically what Jochebed was doing. She was giving her child some kind of chance to live, not knowing if she'd ever see him again, if he would survive, what would happen. And this happened to us Jewish people many, many times, hundreds of times, thousands of times during the Holocaust, where women, mothers and fathers had to
Rabbi,
give.
may
Yeah.
I say?
Yes.
There's all kinds of Holocaust, and it's horrible, and then we'll never forget, never again. But a mother will do what she has to do to make sure her children are safe, no matter how painful it is. And being separated, I can relate to that. I just mailed a birthday letter to my son, but I have not seen him since he's 6. And his daddy died suddenly, and I did what I had to do to make sure that with my beautiful sister-in-law that they are okay. And I have no regrets for that. And I can relate to this in a way but they're proud of me. My daughter says, Mommy, don't cry, go sing me a song. So, you do what you have to do in the time that when it happens, but the best for them.
Right, absolutely. And you can relate to this more than most of us.
That's why I'm crying.
I'm sorry. We didn't, thank God none of us had to go through that. So, and I guess,
But they're proud of me. They're proud of me. I haven't seen them yet, but I will one day.
Also, yes, I'm sure they are. Women who give up their children for adoption because they can't take care of them, is really difficult also. And we know that the trauma really never goes away. So Jochebed kind of embodies kind of a woman of valor, or an understanding of putting our children, doing what we need to do to save our children and the burden. And that's probably why the rabbis honor her so greatly, because they could understand that. And sadly, it was going on 4,000 years ago, and it happened 80 years ago, and it's probably happening somewhere in this world right now.
Every time I play the piano, I write a song for them, and I know it's going to inspire my grandchildren, and it's going to make everybody proud and bring us back together.
That's beautiful. So I want to wish you all that uplifting. No, no, but I think, this is a very interesting character. These 5 women, the 2 midwives, Miriam, who has her own story, Jochebed, and Pharaoh's daughter. Without them, Moses would never have survived. Moses would never have been able to be the man that he became. And a lot of people don't realize that there were these 5 women, oftentimes broke laws, broke the rules, defied authority, put their own lives in danger in order to save this one child, who ended up, changing, receiving the Torah and changing, turning the Jewish people into a nation and a people with a purpose and a goal, as opposed to just a tribe or a group of slaves.
Amen.
So I want to wish you all Shabbat Shalom. Does anybody want to say anything before we end?
There's a coda to that, Zipporah. With the
Zipporah. We're going to study Zipporah.
Yeah, what?
We're going to do Zipporah. We're going to do a session on Zipporah.
All right, good.
That's Moses's wife, who saved his life in another odd way. Very odd, very bizarre.
Good. I hope that we get an explanation for the bridegroom of blood. So.
I thought it would be nice to end on a kind of a humorous end, if anybody doesn't mind. This is directed toward Penina, who talked about her son who didn't speak till he was 3. And there's a story about this family who had a young boy. He was now 4 or 5 years old, and he hadn't spoken a word. And they had him to doctors, and they did everything to try to get him to speak. And finally, one day they're having breakfast, and out of this boy's mouth says, "The toast is burned." And they look at him and they, did what? And they said, "What, you just spoke for the first time?" He says, "Well, up until now, everything was fine."
Oh, that's hilarious.
That's funny.
I hope that you took that in the sense it was meant to Penina.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone. Thank you, Rabbi.
Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
We love you. You should write a book, Rabbi.